like to use our model to demonstrate two types of eclipses. The first type of eclipse is the solar eclipse. A solar eclipse occurs when the moon blocks the view of the sun as seen from the Earth. So we have our soccer ball representing the Earth. We're viewing it from the position of the sun, our lamp. So when the moon positions itself between the Earth and the sun, and we get a shadow of the moon on the Earth, that is a solar eclipse. Now if we look up in the sky, the size of the moon and the size of the sun appear to be almost exactly the same, about half a degree wide in the sky. And that's simply a coincidence. The sun is of course much larger than the moon, but also much further away. They just appear to be the same size in the sky. But because of that, we see during a solar eclipse a spectacular effect. We can actually see the corona of the sun extending out from the moon when it totally blocks the sun. And that's something you can't see any other time from the Earth. The other thing to remember is because the moon barely covers the sun, the shadow on the Earth is actually quite small, and you have to travel and know exactly where a solar eclipse is going to occur to see it. Now we'll notice that the solar eclipse can only occur when the moon is between the Earth and the sun. And so a solar eclipse can only occur during the new moon phase. Now the second type of eclipse is a lunar eclipse. And that occurs when the Earth blocks the view of the sun to the moon. So the Earth is casting a shadow on the moon. Now again, this can only happen when the Earth is between the moon and the sun. And that is during a full moon phase. During a lunar eclipse, the entire moon can be blocked out by the Earth. The reason for that is, remember, the Earth is 4 times larger, 4 times wider than the moon. So if you're on the moon looking back at the Earth, you'd see something 4 times larger than the sun. And so that shadow is much larger on the moon. One interesting thing about lunar eclipses is during the eclipse, you can still see the moon. It looks like a coppery red color. So why is that if it's in the shadow of the Earth? Well, the reason is that the Earth has an atmosphere. So when we have a lunar eclipse, light from the sun can actually bend all the way around the Earth and shine a coppery light on the moon. In fact, from the moon, you look back on the Earth and you get to see all the sunsets of the Earth at the same time. So when we're seeing a lunar eclipse, we're seeing that light reflected back to us from the moon. So one question you may have is, why don't we have a solar eclipse every time there's a new moon and have a lunar eclipse every time there's a full moon? And there are 2 reasons for this. One is the moon does not orbit around the Earth in a perfectly straight line between the Earth and the sun. It's a little bit off. And remember, to this scale, the moon and the Earth should be 20 feet apart, with the sun 1.5 miles away at this scale. So to line things up perfectly is actually kind of tricky. So in reality, we only get 2 pair of eclipses a year. We'll get 1 month where we'll have a solar eclipse, 2 weeks later a lunar eclipse, and then 6 months later another pair. And in fact, things may not line up so perfectly, so we could have things called a partial solar eclipse, where the moon only blocks part of the sun. And on the other side, a partial lunar eclipse, where the moon does not fall completely in the Earth's shadow.